Alright, let me know if you guys hear me. Okay, see on my other stream. I think everything's all good to go. Just type in chat if everything's all good on my end. Or just let me know if you're here. Okay. Hi, Natalie. um, I'll just wait just a few minutes to have everybody roll in, and we'll start in just a few. It won't be that long. But in the meantime, if you are here already, um, today I'll be talking about the UI in Unity, how to use it, the best ways to use it, and all the different things you could do. Also, how to access various components of it through the scripts, because when you're developing a game, obviously that's important. If you have a score, you want it to display onto the screen, so that's obviously a good thing. And I know a lot of you aren't sure exactly how to do that already, so that's what we'll be doing today. So hopefully this is a good lesson for you guys. And before anything else, I just want you guys all to look at this. I'll post the link in the chat right now. Oop, I have to log in. Give me a sec. Gotta do a verification code, and we'll be all good. 033. Okay. Okay, that's the link for what I'm looking at right now. Basically, next week, Natalie is going to be testing your games and trying your games out on stream. So, you guys all need to have something for us to look at. So the first thing is this game making setup. We've already done this already. We had everybody go into a group meeting where we all discussed and worked towards having our projects actually be collaborated together with. So you guys should all be good with this first part. Now the next part, if you haven't done this yet, is pre-production. I know we don't have the studio anymore, but this is still a very important aspect towards developing your games. Writing out what you want your game to be is very important. Just thinking about it is one thing, but having it written down is even better because it's something to refer back to. It's something you could refer back to, add to, and just have everything in one nice place, and then you could think it out better. You could see the flaws in some of the game elements, or you could see the lack of game elements once everything's written down. We have the different character controllers that Natalie discussed in the last Twitch stream. So decide on which one you want to use for that, and you could check the last stream for how to implement those. And what's next? Think about what you want your game to play like. Thinking of a concept is one thing, but having a game plan, what you want the gameplay to actually be, is even more important. Because if you have a really good idea with no gameplay, you don't have a game. So for next week, try to just have the very core basics of a game, so that way we have something to work with on stream. So that was just my quick little thing. We discussed this, and we'll just move on to the actual lesson. So today, as I said, we'll be doing UI. And the very first thing I want to talk about is when you create a new UI element, it'll create this canvas. There's some things you should touch on here every time you make a new canvas. By default, the canvas scaler will be on constant pixel size. for the most part, this isn't what you want on your canvas, because when you change screens or the different resolutions on, like if you just move to a different computer, this is a collaborative process, so each of us have different hardware. Your UI will look different on each computer if you have constant pixel size, because it's going to be based on the resolution of each person's computer. What I like to do is do scale with screen size. Basically, however it looks on your screen is how it'll look on pretty much all the other screens. There's some things you also have to do on top of that to make it look the same on every screen, but for the most part, doing scale with screen size will help tremendously in making sure all your UI assets, all your UI components are right in the right spot. So the very first thing is we have our text here. The point value. When you make a new text, they'll have a rect transform. On every UI element, there'll be a rect transform. This is different from a regular game object where they just have a transform. That's because the UI is not within it. It's hard to explain, but it's not exactly connected to the game environment. It's sort of like an overlay that's on top of the game scene. Oh, hi, Narelle. So that's why it has a rect transform. So with the rect transform, there's anchor points, and anchor points will help a lot with making sure your UI looks the same on every computer resolution. So as I said earlier, the scale with screen size is one thing. Anchor points is another thing that'll help greatly with making sure UI elements look right. So right now, the anchor, as you can see, this little box here is our text element. And right now our anchor is on the top left. So basically, on the screen, it's going to look for the top left of the screen, well, of the point, and it'll put the text on the top left. And if that doesn't make any sense, I'll show you in just a sec what it means in the game environment. But if I move this over here, okay. So as you can see, I put it in the bottom right. So now it renders from the bottom right all the way down here. And you could go all around. As you can see, top right is over here. Bottom left is down here. So if you're going to have your text element be on the top left corner, make sure your anchor point is also on the top left. Because if I change my resolution to something weird, like 5:4, you'll see my point value still remains there because I have it anchored towards the top left of the screen. If I were to change that, let's go back to this resolution. If I were to make this bottom left, anchor it down here, and I change the resolution again, you'll see it's nowhere to be found because the anchor point is down here. So as the resolution changes, it'll render from the bottom right corner, which will shoot it off of the screen, as you can see happened here. These are small things to consider. You might not think it's the most important thing, but having your game look uniform across all platforms is very important. So that's what the anchors do. You could play with them, and you could test it out by going to the game window, clicking on here, and then you could just change your resolution. But as I said, if we're going to have the score in the top left corner, we're going to make the anchor point the top left. So that way when we change it, it'll stay on the top left. So going along with this, if you look at the actual text component, there's a bunch of different things we could do here. I'm sure you guys all understand what this is. You could change your font. You could import different fonts and just drag them in. All fine and dandy. You could change what it says here. The font style. You already know this. But the next part under paragraph, these are some other things you might want to consider. If you have it anchored on the top left, you most likely want it to be the alignment to also be top left, or just left side. If we were to change this and bring it down here, and we were to anchor it on the bottom right, it might be in our best interest to set the alignment to the right side, so that way the way it pushes. If I add more text here, it's aligned to the right side, the rightmost side. And this right here is another thing I wanted to discuss. As you can see, it doesn't fit here, so it gets pushed down. The way you can fix that is you could either just make this element bigger, so that way it doesn't have to squish itself or not fit. But another thing you could do is you could also click on best fit, and it'll scale the text to best match the size of this window you have. So if I were to make this even smaller, you'll see the text will shrink. And if I make this bigger, it'll make sure to always fit onto the screen if you do best fit. But if you don't want the text to change in size, definitely don't click best fit. Just make sure whatever you put in there will fit within this window that you set for it. Yep, and then there's also, along with aligning to the left, middle, and right, there's also centering your text. So, as you can see, I have this square here. If I click on this one, the text will go from the top. Then if I click on the middle one, it'll be on the middle, and the last one all the way down. So as I add more stuff here, if I were to just click a letter, you'll see it pushes up from the bottom. Or if I have it in the middle. This is just different ways to display your text. It's mostly preferential, but just knowing that these things exist could help just to make your design just a tad bit better. We'll just get rid of all this. And just align everything back to the top right. So that's that. That's pretty much all I want to talk about with that. But the second thing I wanted to talk about is, if you go to the UI, right now this is just a basic text, but there's also a TextMeshPro. This is something you have to import, so if you do a new TextMeshPro, just click on Import TMP Essentials. TMP stands for TextMeshPro. TextMeshPro, it's just, in my opinion, it's just a slightly better version of your regular text. I prefer it over the regular text because there's different things about it that just give you more flexibility with how you want your text to look. As you can see, the options here are slightly different, and we have all these new extra settings down here. I very much enjoy these because when you have text, sometimes it's hard to see based on the background, but if you see one of these extra settings is outline. So if I make this bigger, you'll see it adds a black outline to the text. I personally like this a lot better. It looks a bit weird here, but you could play with the softness and of everything, the dilation, to make the text look even nicer. So if you just put these side by side and just hit the play button to show it bigger on the screen. Like, it's your opinion. I personally think the right one looks slightly better because it has a nice little outline to it. If I look down, you'll see the point value sort of gets lost in the background, but the TextMeshPro version, where I added the border around it, does not get lost in the background. Like I said, these are small things, but as long as you know that these things exist, I'm happy with that. But along with this, you also have to consider, what is this? Okay, you also have to consider that this is a TextMeshPro UGUI component now, which is different from the text component in the regular text. The reason you need to know this is because when we go to change the text through the script, we have to reference these in different ways because they're not the same component. This is a TextMeshPro UGUI, and this is just a regular text element. So, one last thing I wanted to talk about with that is, I'll bring this up. If you just look up Unity TextMeshPro rich text, or just rich text, because this is the same for the regular text as well, you'll see all this documentation, which sounds a bit confusing, but I'll explain it for you in just a sec. You can scroll down and they show you how to use each of these things. And basically, these are just different ways you could change the text through the string right here. So if you don't know what that means, I'll go right over here to the text. And let's say I want the word value to be bolded, but not the whole, not point value, just value. Just that one thing to be bolded. Normally you can't do that. You either have to make the whole thing bold or not the whole thing bold. But if you were to type in, here, I'll show you. Here we go, bold and italic. You'll see if you do this, it'll make the text bold. So if you put this bracket B in front and then /B at the end, it'll make everything within those two brackets, it'll make it bolded. And I'll just show you right now. It updates in real time, so you can see what it looks like. And you'll see the brackets go away once I finish it off. But now value is now bolded, and point is not bolded. And along with this, we could also make it italic. They all stack upon each other, so you could add more things to it. That's fancy. Oh, yep, and Natalie just posted the link to that page I brought up. So if you want to check it out yourself, you could do that. Like I said, all these things aren't incredibly important, but from a design aspect, these small touches, they give a lot towards the overall feeling of your game. It shows they put care into it, that the small things matter. They add up to a greater thing. If that makes any sense. There's other things here. You guys could all play with them or just check them out. I'm not going to go through all of them because there's a ton of things you can do here. But I just wanted to talk about the basic ones, such as bolding and italicizing, because I just think they're unique. Not that many people know about them. They just look really nice in my opinion. And you could do the same thing with TextMeshPro as well, if you wanted to know. It works with this as well. So, next thing on the list is I'm going to talk about how to actually change this text through the code, because what's the point of having a point UI to keep track of score if you don't actually show the score? So I'll show you how to do that. They work in two different ways. So because I prefer the TextMeshPro version, I'll show you how to do the TextMeshPro version first, and then I'll just show you what you have to do differently to make the regular text work. Actually, I'll just keep them both up there. But what I want to do, we have our cat player. So let's just say the score is every time we hit or knock over a object in the scene, such as the vase or this potted plant over here. Each time we knock something over, I want to get a point. So how do we do that? So let's go to the script. We have the animal controller in here. We'll open this up, and all the way at the bottom, we have our logic for knocking things over. So before we get to that, we first need to add the text. So in order to use UI text, there's two things you have to do. Well, one thing for each of them. So to use the regular text, you have to import Unity engine.ui. Otherwise, you cannot reference the text component that is on the text object. Okay, yeah, you could do gradients. It's fancy. I recommend it. You could also change the font. So if you want a specific word to be a font, you can also do that. To do that, it's slightly different or slightly confusing. You have to go to TextMeshPro, Resources, and then Fonts and Materials. You have to make sure the font you import is in this folder. Otherwise, it won't work. If you do the font change, like right here, you do font, equals whatever the name of the text is, you have to make sure it is in this folder. You can't make your own font folder. It has to be in this one. That's just how the system works. And that's something I think you should know if you want to do that. It has to be in TextMeshPro, Resources, and Fonts and Shaders. But back to what I was saying. You need to import UnityEngine.ui if you want to reference this component right here, which we need in order to change the UI. And for TextMeshPro, though, this is also different. You need to import using TMPro. So TextMeshPro is what that means. Like I said, I'm showing you two different things right now, but in order to use the text, you need to import UnityEngine.ui. If you want to do a TextMeshPro, you have to import TMPro. Otherwise, when you type it in here, I'll show you what it looks like if you don't have it here. We'll make a public text. Like, you'll see it doesn't let you type it in because it doesn't exist. Score. So I have an error here. It's not working. That's because I don't have the using statement here. UnityEngine.ui. So once I import this, you'll see my error goes away, and now it's there. And that's what importing it does. It imports those components that you can now use, access in the script. And for TextMeshPro, this one is slightly different. This one is called TextMeshPro UGUI. And if you ever forget that, just remember, it's the same as this component name right here. Even the other one, the text, it's always going to be the name of the component if you forget. So if you ever forget what it's called, it's right here. And we'll call this one TMPro score. Okay, so now that we imported our scores, we can now use them and change them how we want. So if I go down here, I want to increase the score. Actually, I lied. Before we do that, we have to make sure in start, we start off with no score. One more thing. We actually need to have a score variable that we now reference. So we're going to make this an integer, and we'll call this one score UI. Okay, sorry about that. So now that we actually have a score, we can now make the text equal to this score so that we could display the score onto the screen. So in start, we have to first initialize it. So if we don't initialize it, it's just going to say whatever we have over here, which is just point value, because we never changed it. If we don't change it, it's going to remain the same. So if I go back here, in start, what you have to do for the regular text, I call this score UI. Type in the name of what you named it, dot text equals, and then you could input a string here. So what we could do is we could type the word score and then plus score. Now what this means, it probably looks confusing. Score UI dot text is looking for a string, which is an accumulation of letters and whatever. So right now we're just adding a string. We're just hard writing score. So it's just going to display the word score. And then these quotes just holds this bit of text together. So this little bit is just a string called score. And then this plus means we're concatenating. It's concatenation. We're going to add this number to this string. So now, when we play the game, in the very first frame of the game, it's going to set the text of our score UI equal to score and whatever value our score is. So right now, we're going to set, by default, our score equal to 0. So if I go back, run the game, it'll say score with a space is equal to 0. And I'll just show that right now. We'll go back to the cat. And you'll see we have our components in the inspector here, where we drag and drop our two texts. And just make sure the TextMeshPro one goes in TextMeshPro, and vice versa. And when we start the game, it should change it to, yeah, now it says score is 0, because that's what we've written it to do here. We did score, and then what the value of the score is, which we set to 0 in the beginning. So now, when we change the score, when we knock something over, we're going to want it to update this score. Because every time I knock something over, I want to gain 1 score. And we'll just do that right now. And at the same time, I'll also show you the TextMeshPro version if you want to use this text instead. Because as I said, I personally find this one a bit more appealing to look at. This one we called, and this one works the same way. You don't have to remember anything different. This one is tmpro.text, just like the other one. And you could just copy and paste the same thing, because it works the same exact way. And if we play the game, this one should also update the same exact way. And you see it does. And if you remember, I added these things here. Like I said, right now it doesn't look the best, because I'm not trying to make it look the best. I'm just showing you that these things exist. But going along with that, you can also add it to here if you would like. If you want the score to be a different color, you could just do it right here if you want. So I could do color equals red. Oh, I lied. We have to make this a new string. Score. And then another new string. Color. Okay. So basically what I'm doing, because score is a variable and not a string, we just flat out write the word score. But these things here are strings. So that's why I have them in the quotes here. But since I added these new things here, when I play the game, the score itself should be a different color. And let's see if it actually works. Okay, so it does. So you'll see now the score is a different color. Like I said, you could play with this how you would like. Another thing I would like to also bring up while I'm at it, color picker. This right here, it doesn't have to be a flat out word. If you go back here, actually I'm not sure if this tells you. Okay, this doesn't tell you all the potential ones you can use, but it's pretty much just the basic colors. If you want to get a specific color, you can just pick any color here, and each color has a hex value associated with it. You can copy and paste this and replace the word red with that hex value, and it'll work the same way. So that way, if you want a very specific color and not just a generic green, red, yellow, or whatever, you can do that as well. And as you can see, that's the same green as this here. It's just different things I want you to know about. It's a lot to remember now, but you can refer back to this stream in the future. I'll just get rid of this because it doesn't matter that much. And get back to what I was saying before with updating the score. So now that we have a score variable, we can now go down here. This is where we hit the object. So on trigger stay, it's going to check to see, am I hitting the button, which is left mouse click, and am I within range to knock something over? And then if so, we're going to add the force. But now we also wanted to add a number to the score. So we'll just do score plus equals 1. And if you forgot, plus equals means score is equal to score plus 1. So whatever the original value is, plus this value that we add here. So in the beginning it's 0, then if I do plus equal 1, score is now 1. And after we do that, we can now update the score. I'm just going to copy and paste this because it's the same, and do that here. And I think I should just point out, I could also just put this in update, so every frame it'll update, or I could just do it right here where I actually update it, like the one time I do change it. It doesn't matter that much in your cases. One might be slightly more efficient because I'm only running this one time, whereas if I have it in update, it runs continuously. But for the projects you're working on, it doesn't really matter, but in case you were curious. So theoretically, once I hit something over, my score should increase, and the score will update with my new score. Well, the score UI will update with the new score I have. Let's go here. Okay, so I knocked it over, but it seems I hit it twice. Okay, that one was once. I wonder if that has two. Let's see. Okay, yeah, this one has two colliders. So that might be why. Oh no, actually, it doesn't. This one. Okay. Yeah, I think it's because it has two colliders that it's updating twice. But, like I said, I'm just trying to show you we're just updating the UI. So if you just want to update the score, boom, that's it right there. So the next thing I want to do is, let's make a UI image. Okay, so we got this UI image right here. And what I want to do, or show you, is you could change the fill of a UI image. So what do I mean by this? Let me just put a temporary sprite in here. Let's just make it this circle. It looks really ugly, but I'm just showing you how to do it. So once you select a sprite, you'll see image type pop up. If you make it filled, all these even more options will come up, and you can see fill amount. You can drag it, and it'll render like radially, if that makes any sense. So I'll show you why this is important later, but there's also different things. There's also, you can fill it horizontally, so you could do it like this. If you had a health bar, let's say this was like this. Let's say this was your health bar. You would want this to be horizontal, so each time you get hit, your bar would go down, theoretically, and so on. So what I'm going to show you, I'm going to make it back, I'm going to put it back to radial, because I'm going to make a cooldown, and each time you hit, I'm going to visually show on the screen how much time you have left based on this fill amount, which I will do radial 360. So once I hit the button to hit something, this will now go on cooldown, and I can't use it until it reaches this, until it reaches 0. So that's what I'm going to do. First, we need a base. This would be the one I want to show in the background. And I'm going to have one on the top. So that way, if you could just see, it'll uncover the one behind it as the timer goes down. You might want to make this a slightly lower opacity, so that way you can see behind it. But since I don't actually have an image here, you might not notice. Oop, not that. If I were to change it to something you can see, such as, sure, this one. We could do this, if that makes sense. Okay. So now I'll show you how to do that. This is a sprite's image. So as I said before, if you forget what it's called, what you have to put here, it's just this right here. And same as the text, in order to use the image, because it's also a UI element, you have to make sure Unity engine.ui is at the top. Otherwise, you can't use image. So if I make a public image cooldown UI, And I need 2 more things to go along with this. Float cooldown. And we're going to have a current cooldown. So basically, cooldown is the length I want to wait. And then the current cooldown, oh, I spelled that wrong, is going to be where it's at on that cooldown cycle. The reason I have it like this is because we're going to get a percentage number. In order to have a percentage number, we need to know the max and the current amount that the timer is on. So that way, based on that percentage, we can change the fill amount. So, what I'm going to do here, in update, we're going to do current cooldown minus equals time dot delta time. So basically all the time your current cooldown is going to continuously go down. That way when I hit the attack button, I'm going to set the fill amount to max, and then it's going to continually go down because I'm making it continually go down here. So that's that. Then what we have to do here, okay, when we hit the button, we're going to do current cooldown is equal to max cooldown. Ooh, did I just call it cooldown? Okay, this might make more sense if I write it out as max cooldown, so I'll do that. And call this one max cooldown. So now when we attack, we're setting cooldown equal to the max cooldown. So let's say the cooldown is 5 seconds. When we hit the attack button, current cooldown will now be 5 seconds, and that number will continually go down. And one other thing we need to do, this is just checking while we're in the trigger and we hit the button. We also want to, actually I lied, this wouldn't go here, this would go, we're gonna search for when we call get mouse button, get mouse button. Okay, up here, this is actually where we set the animation to do that. So this is where I want to put it. So we're going to put this in an if statement. We're going to do if current cooldown is less than 0. What this does, basically, as long as my cooldown is over, I can now attack again. So when I do the attack, which I'll put over here, actually I'll do it right now for you. Here we go. Current cooldown equal max cooldown. So now when I do the attack, we're going to set current cooldown equal to max cooldown. For this example, let's just say it's 5 seconds. So once I attack, current cooldown is now 5 seconds. So this means I cannot attack as long as this number is above 0. So for 5 seconds, I cannot do the attack again. And that's what the cooldown is. But now we actually have to physically show the percentage on the screen. So we'll do that in update. Right here. So the formula, let's see. Okay, yeah, I'll do that in just a sec, Natalie. Let me just show this real quick. Okay. So the formula to get the percentage of something, I'll just put it here. It is the current number minus the min number divided by max number minus min number. So current number, this is going to be your current cooldown. Min number would be 0, because once it reaches 0, the cooldown is now over. And the max number will be our max cooldown. So if we write this out, we called the, let's see, it's called cooldown UI. So cooldown UI is our image. So if we call cooldown UI dot fill amount, if we go back here, fill amount is this right here, this bar. So this is what we're referencing right now, this bar. We're going to set it equal to the current cooldown minus 0, because 0 is our minimum amount, divided by the max cooldown minus 0 again, because that's our minimum. And by doing this, it's going to get a percentage based on where cooldown is compared to the max cooldown. So if we're 2.5 seconds through the cooldown, it'll be 50%. I think that's everything. But one thing I should do, in start, we're going to, let's put this right here. Actually, that doesn't need to be there. But what we do need to do is we need to set current cooldown equal to 0. So that way it starts with you having a cooldown. Oh, and one last thing. Because that's just for the animation, we also want to make sure the action itself of adding the forest does not happen unless we are not attacking. So we want to put this, where'd it go? And less than 0. Okay. So if we test this out, oh, I never dragged it in. Let me do that real quick. Go to the cat. We're going to put our image. We want to put the overlay version. Ooh, not this. This is the overlay. This one. Okay. The one that has the black thing. That's the one we want to put on here. So put that there. So let's just see if in the beginning. Okay, so in the beginning it goes away. And when I attack, whoa, nothing happens. Great. Okay, let's see what I did wrong. Let's see. So when you attack, cooldown is equal to max cooldown. And in update, fill amount is equal to current cooldown minus that. Let's actually debug this number right here. Just see what it actually says. And this is going to be the cooldown. So the cooldown, negative infinity. Well, that's not good. I wonder why that is. Oh, we never set a max cooldown in the inspector. That would be it. Okay. Sorry about that. Completely forgot. If you check here, our max cooldown, we never set it. So let's do that. Let's make it 5 seconds. Okay, so there we go. Now it works. So as you can see, I hit the button, and now I have to wait 5 seconds. And if I click the button again, because I told it only to happen if the cooldown is less than 0, I could only attack once the cooldown's over. And now it visually shows that I have to wait this long to do it. So as what Natalie was saying, this is obviously important. As I talk, I'll just move this to a better place. This is important because as a player of a game, it's important to, well, as a developer, it's important that you give the player as much information as possible about your game. If the player does not know how long they have to wait to do an attack, well, before they can attack again, I don't know what to say besides that's just bad game design. The player should always know how long they have to wait before they can attack again. If you have a reload, you can visually see him reloading. If the reload animation wasn't there, it would just be very awkward. You're just standing there waiting 5 seconds. Visually showing it is just, it just feels better, you know? And giving the player the knowledge, I guess, of their actions in the game it's just good game design. Also, it's another moving part of the game, so it'll just make your game look better because something they do in the game is now affecting something on the screen, the UI. Oh yes, also for the actual gameplay aspect of it, being able to just walk around and infinitely attack, that's also not great because you could just go around and just mess everything up. Like, just super fast. If I just spam the click button, just go crazy, knock everything over. That's not what you want. You want sort of you don't want the player to just randomly be clicking, because obviously that'd be the most effective strategy, to just spam click, because as soon as you get within range, you would just instantly hit it. Having this cooldown makes the player forced to make sure they're positioned properly before they attack or whatever. It just adds more to it. If I didn't have that, I would just spam the click button over here until I hit something. Whereas now that I have a cooldown, I want to make sure that each click I do counts. It may not seem that important, but these are all the small things, like I said in the as I've been continually saying with the UI, like the difference between TextMeshPro and Text. It's the small things that add up that just make your game feel better. Yeah. That's what I have to say about that. So let's see. The next thing I want to talk about. There's only 10 minutes left, but I'll start you guys off with buttons anyway. So, if you've seen buttons, this button, TextMeshPro button, it's basically the same thing. The functionality of the button is the same, but the text that actually shows up on the button is TextMeshPro. If I click on the TextMeshPro one, where would it be? Oop, I think I just clicked on the wrong one. That's a toggle. We want a UI button. Here we go. Okay. So, it's just a regular button. I'm sure you guys know this already. I'll just say it again. There's different colors and highlight colors here. Actually, let me change it first. If I make the highlight color red, when I go and hover over the button, you see it changes to red. That's one thing. There's also pressed color. This is the color that flashes real quick when you click on the button. See, it flashes red real quick. And selected and disabled. You'll see, you saw before when I clicked on it, it flashed red and then it went white. That's because the selected color was white. If I make it purple, after I click on it, it'll go purple. So now it's purple. And for the same thing is the disabled color. Actually, this is slightly different. Disabled has to do with functionality. This isn't important to you guys, but you could turn off a button, so that way players can't click on it. So this would be the color that shows up for when that happens. But we're not going to focus on that now. And you could also do the fade duration. If I make this really long, you'll see, it takes a while for it to go to the color I set it to. Not that important. I think the default 0.1 looks the best, so I just keep it that way. And then there's also on click. So this is where you actually get to the functionality of it. You could create a script. Let's just say, here, I'll do this. So in the player script, I'm just gonna make a new function. We're gonna make it public because I want it to be referenced from the button. If it was private, I cannot reference this script from the button, but since it's public, I will be able to. And I'm just gonna call this clicked button. And I'm just gonna debug to the console. Oop, sorry about that. Public void click button. Debug log. I'm just gonna print to the console. I clicked the button. Okay. So you'll see here we have an object it's looking for. So because the script is on my player object, I drag in the player, and now you'll see this light up. This is all the components that are on the player. The script I put that in is the animal controller. Then I click on animal controller, and these are all the potential functions I can now call on the button. From the script. So the one I just made is clicked button. So now that I have that all set up, when I click the button, in the debug, it'll say clicked button. And I'll just get rid of this debug. I don't need it anymore. And I'm also going to turn off maximize on play. So when I click the button, it says I clicked the button. So I don't know how you're going to use this in your game because every game is different. But if you want something to happen based on a button click, you can make it happen. Let's say you wanted to reload every time you click a button. You would just do that right here. So instead of saying debug.log, you would have current ammo is whatever. Can you make the cat? Yeah, I could actually. So let's just find the logic for that. Okay, so it's the jump. So if I put jump in here. So jump is the function that controls the jumping. So since I set it to that, it's going to print I clicked the button, but it's also going to make the cat jump. Boop. So you see the cat jumps now. It's the same as any other function, but you're just calling it from the button. Just think of it that way. Whatever is in this function, all the code within that function will get called once I click on the button. I'll comment this out. And we have 8 minutes left. There's one more thing I want to talk about, which is, go back here, button, add component. It's called event trigger. So as you can see on the button, we only have on click, but there's a few other things we can do if we add an event trigger to something. So if you click on add new event type, you'll see all these things. So this pointer enter, exit, down, up, whatever. Pointer exit, well, pointer enter, that's when you hover over a button. So when the pointer enters the button, that's on hover. The pointer exit is the opposite of that. It's when you take the mouse off of the button. Pointer down is when you click on it. Pointer up is so after you click on it when you let go of the button. And all these things. So there's a bunch here. You can play with it. The most important ones are just the first 4, so that's all I'm going to care about. So let's say if on hover, you want it to... We'll do the same thing. We'll do jump. So when I hover over the button, I'm going to make the cat jump. So it works the same exact way as on click. We're going to take the cat, drag it in, because the cat player game object is what has the animal controller script, which has this. Although, to make it less confusing, I'll just make a new function. Public void on hover. And we'll just take the jump function and put it here. And instead of calling clicked button, we're going to call on hover, which is right here. So play the game. And when I hover over the button, it jumps. you're probably not going to use it how I use it here, but I just want you to know that these things exist. Because you could do some fancy stuff. Um, like in a game I made, when I did on hover, I started making the button, like the actual text that says button, like get nice, like expand and contrast. You can do different things. I just want you to know it's there, as I said already. Uh, you could play with event triggers yourself. Um, yeah, that's pretty much that. Hopefully, you learned a decent amount about UI. It's fairly complicated, but it's very useful. There's a lot you can do with it. Remember that on Monday, Natalie will be playing your games, so make sure you work on it. As I said early in the video, when we looked at that webpage, make sure you have a core game design concept, not just an idea of what you want your game to be, but also what the actual gameplay itself will be. Because if you don't have gameplay, then you don't have a game. You can have the best idea, but if there's no gameplay, it's just not a game. So that's what I would focus on for next week. Make sure you have an actual gameplay, well, base gameplay that we can do something with. Yeah, that's that. Class is pretty much over now. I'm gonna sign off. Good luck on your games, and hopefully you learned something today. So, bye bye.